back with more Barnstable This Morning. I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me live on the phone, I welcome first Barnstable State Representative Tim Whelan. Rep. Whelan, good morning.
Hey, Sarah, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Can you get over the weather out there today?
Oh, it's fantastic. You know, I went on a nice bike ride yesterday, and as I was riding through Centerville and Osterville, it's like, this is perfect. This is just the way it is. We love it. It's a good month, to be alive.
When you're out for those long bike rides, I find that stopping to get some ice cream to help refuel is always a good plan.
Oh, okay. I'll duly noted for the next ride. I do ride by Four Seas in Centerville, so we'll have to make a stop.
Four Seas is the best.
It's so good. So Tim, there's obviously been a lot of news lately about what happened up on Beacon Hill last week, and that was the passage of the Transgender Rights bill. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know that, last week we talked with Randy Hunt, a Republican, who voted for it, but your vote was against the bill, and I wanted to talk a little with you about your concerns regarding the bill that passed last week.
Sure, Sarah. What it was the bill number was House 4343. It's basically a redraft of Senate 735. Senate 735 was titled "An Act Relative to Gender Identity and Non-Discrimination." And what this did was this would affect access, and it affected several things, but it affected access for members of the transgender community to what they term as public accommodations. Now, public accommodations has a very, very lengthy list, like an inn, a tavern, a carrier conveyance, elevator, restaurant, bar, gas station, garage, restroom, barbershop, and the like. And nobody, I think, in their right mind wants to see anybody from any demographic whatsoever suffer from any discrimination in any of these locations. The part with this that was controversial was that the access that this bill would grant to traditionally sex-segregated facilities such as bathrooms and locker rooms or multi-stall public showers, such as like in schools or, let's say, down at Fitness 500 or someplace like that, that the access would be granted not based upon the sex at someone's birth or, what their anatomical gender identity was, but based upon their own personal gender identity, which is the way that someone would view themselves. In approaching this bill, not only did I read it and research it and look at how it's been enacted successfully in other states, but I think what's really important for any legislator to do is to speak to their constituents. And this bill was sensitive to a lot of people on both sides of the issue, and as a result, I had an awful lot of constituents reach out to me with this, with concerns on this bill one way or the other. And I would say that I had the overwhelming number of constituents reach out to me with opposition to this portion of the bill that I mentioned, which was the access to those sex-segregated facilities. What my constituents were reaching out to me with, those in opposition to the bill, were privacy concerns. And I have to be respectful of that as well, because people have a right to feel, if their privacy is being violated, and to communicate that to me, what their feelings are as I approach the bill. So there were a number of amendments that were filed to this bill, because it wasn't just me that they were reaching out to. There were 160 other legislators, obviously, across the state. And a total of 36 amendments, Sarah, were filed to this bill. Some of the, just like any other bill that gets a lot of amendments, some of the amendments are very common sense. Some of them drift away from common sense, in my opinion. Some of the amendments are a long way from common sense, in my opinion, as well. And I'll just give you an example of some of the amendments there were a few amendments that were in here that were critical to being included to the bill in order for it to gain my support. And for instance, Amendment number 4 would have kept the bill from applying to multi-capacity locker rooms and showers. And this was an amendment that I actually had co-sponsored based upon, like I said, the feedback and my own concerns relative to privacy as well. And that amendment was defeated. We had Amendment number 10, which would have excluded locker rooms dedicated to minors from being included, and that amendment was defeated. We had two bipartisan amendments. By that I mean there was one amendment that pretty much mirrors of one another, one being filed by a Republican, one being filed by a Democrat, which would have restricted registered sex offenders from accessing facilities of their opposite anatomical gender, and which seemed very much common sense to me, but that amendment was defeated. And to answer concerns from some parents that reached out to me relative to letting their children use a restroom facility and having an adult of the opposite anatomical gender walk in, one amendment was filed by a friend of mine that would have allowed a parent to escort their child into a restroom facility and stand by the door while their child was using the facility, and that amendment was defeated. Amendment number. Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
No,
I tend to drift on sometimes.
Right, exactly. And if I may, I think that, some of the concerns we had, obviously, in listening to this, I think some of the opposition really was concerned about predatory behaviors. What I'm hearing from you is really more concerns about privacy. And certainly, I think when you go into a bathroom and you can close the door, really doesn't matter what happens, when you're behind that door. But I think when you're thinking about, young people in locker room situations, in shared shower situations, I think anybody has a concern about that. Whether you have to worry about transgender folks or not. But what I'm hearing, Tim, and correct me if I'm wrong, is really your concerns fit more into the line of privacy.
And that's it. People have a right to use a facility and feel safe and secure and private, and have their privacy respected. I think that's very important, and I think that gets lost. And what happens sometimes, Sarah, is there are some private organizations that were loud and vocal in opposition to this bill, and their messaging on this, in my opinion, was all wrong when they were talking about trying to protect and keep our children safe, and the concerns that they had that children were going to be sexually assaulted. What ends up happening when you put out a message like that is the opposites, the people with the opposite view can rightly so. They can paint it as, well, you're trying to make a statement that transgenders are some sort of sexual deviant, which is absolutely 100% not the case. I mean, gender dysphoria has nothing to do with sexual deviancy. It's just, like I said, it's a matter of a gender identity thing. And the messaging that was put out was able to be spun as being somewhat, I would say, maybe it's a strong term, but being spun as being somewhat hateful. And when you break it down into brass tacks and look at what the opposition to this bill was, for most of us up there, it was much more benign than that. It was simply just a matter of privacy. When I have a woman reaching out to me who's in her late 60s, telling me that when she goes out and works out at the club, she's very, very concerned that she doesn't want to get naked in a locker room for fear that there may be someone that's anatomically a male next to her. I have to listen to that. I can't automatically discount that, and I think that was done a little bit too easily in this case. So, just as you said, to me, privacy and feeling safe and secure in your own place, that's very important as well. Not only for the transgender community, but also for the non-transgendered community. We had an amendment here, and this one really spoke to me as just the fact that this one didn't get through and was defeated pretty much along party lines, to me was abhorrent. And this was Amendment number 22. It would have provided civil liability protection to police officers when enforcing this law, because when this law is enacted and police officers are called upon to enforce this one way or another, this law, they're going to be very sensitive. People are going to have very sensitive approaches to this issue. Police officers are going to require extensive training. They're going to have to understand exactly what the concerns and what the feelings are of the people when they're called to enforce this law. And it's just going to make it very difficult for them, and they are going to be exposed to civil liability. We just to provide liability protection to these police officers, and that was defeated. So, like I said, I would say if several, not all of them, but even if we could have gotten through 2 or 3 of these common sense amendments to make this a better bill, it would have been much easier for me to support as it was written without including any of these. Out of these 36 amendments, I think 1, maybe 2 got through, and the 1 or 2 that got through were only technical amendments, Sarah. There was nothing that actually affected the meat or of the legislation.
Sure.
So that's where my concerns rested.
Indeed, and again, the bill has passed. Is there any work that you are planning to do to kind of address some of the concerns that remain, or is that going to have to be taken up at another time?
Right now it's beyond our control, because it's been passed by the Senate, it's been passed by the House. It now goes to conference committee. And when it comes out of conference committee, there will be, what will happen is they'll hash out the differences between the Senate and the House versions of the bill. And then it'll be brought before us, the final conference committee report, for a final up or down vote. And I believe that it will be passed in the Senate. I think in the Senate it passed 34-5. I believe it'll be passed in the Senate overwhelmingly, and I believe it'll be passed in the House as well. It is what it is. I wish we could have just gotten a couple of these amendments in there that would have been common sense, in my opinion, that also would have addressed some concerns that were brought to me. They weren't, so that's why my vote went in opposition to the bill, Sarah.
Sure. Well, Rep. Whelan, I thank you so much, as always, for coming on and sharing your perspective. A pleasure to have you as a guest on the show, and we will catch up with you again in a couple of weeks. Until then, keep enjoying this gorgeous weather we've been having.
The pleasure remains mine, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. State Rep Tim Whelan joining us. We're going to send you out to look at that beautiful morning view at Osterville. We'll be back with our Director of Public Works, Dan Sanders.